Sperm is stupid.
What?
Yes, really stupid. I've been diving deep into fertility research lately, and what I found completely changed my view of how I think about conception. We're talking about these tiny cells that are supposed to find an egg the size of a pinhead somewhere in your reproductive system, but they basically have the navigation skills of a drunk tourist without GPS. I guess it's working only because there are millions of them. So today I'm sharing 5 weird fertility facts that sound like myths, but are actually backed by science. And most of this stuff contradicts everything I've been told about getting pregnant. And I'm going to uncover why the common advice you're following might be working against you. And I'll reveal some medical mysteries that even doctors don't discuss with you or their patients. So let's get started about the males and the male fertility window. And you might be thinking, what? There's a male fertility window? Yes, and it's ridiculously specific. So people have focused on the female fertility window most of the times, and people think, well, getting pregnant is a thing for women. But guys have actually their own timing issue that's equally important, and it's actually way more specific than people normally think. After ejaculation, sperm quality doesn't stay constant. Makes kind of sense. And there's actually a narrow time frame when sperm are at their peak performance, which means if you're having sex every day during your fertile window, you might be actually hurting your chances because the guy is just ejaculating too often, and that lowers the sperm quality. Why is that? Because the sperm doesn't have time to mature properly. So if you wait too long between sessions, sperm gets old and sluggish, and if you have intercourse too often, then they're not mature enough. It's basically like Goldilocks, it has to be just right. Sweet spot for most couples, and most of them miss it, is between 2 and 3 days, which combined with the female fertile window makes it pretty narrow actually. But it gives sperm enough time to develop the full swimming power and DNA integrity, but it's not so long that they're past their prime time. And very often people, especially guys, think more is better, but that's not how their biology works. And obviously stress plays a huge role here too. And when men are chronically stressed, it affects sperm production cycles. You're like, what? Production cycles of sperm? Yes. And it can throw off the whole timing thing. Lifestyle factors that mess with your stress can be something like poor sleep, too much caffeine, not enough recovery time. They are all working against this precise biological timing, and most people don't even know about it. You do now, so pay attention. Speaking of timing, here's another thing that stress does to a woman that's even more dramatic than what it does to men. Stress literally makes a woman's uterus hostile. And this isn't some woo-woo mind-body connection thing. Chronic stress literally changes the chemistry inside the uterus. And this can make it hostile to implantation. So when you're stressed, your body pumps out cortisol, and cortisol triggers inflammation throughout your reproductive system. So picture this. The inflammation changes the pH balance in your uterine environment. And this in turn affects the thickness of the uterine lining. And it even changes the chemical signals that are supposed to welcome a fertilized egg. So essentially, stress turns the uterus into an unwelcoming environment, and embryos struggle to implant and survive. So very often people say, well, lower stress is not good. This is the background for that. It's basically a cortisol inflammation connection that is so strong that even if everything else is perfect, timing, sperm quality, egg quality, chronic stress can still prevent conception. Your body is basically saying, not the right time, it's not safe to create life. And your body is basically doing everything it can to prevent the pregnancy from happening in order to protect you, right? Or to protect the baby. This is why all those relaxation techniques aren't just feel-good advice. I would go as far as to say they're medical necessity. So when you manage stress effectively, you're literally changing the chemical environment where conception happens. And people who think meditation and stress management are just hippie nonsense, they're basically missing a crucial piece of the fertility puzzle. And for those of you who've been following my content about cold exposure and stress management, this is exactly why those practices matter so much for overall health. Your stress response affects every system in your body, including reproduction. But stress isn't the only thing creating inflammation that hurts fertility, and that leads me to the next myth, which is fertility diets that most people kind of don't get. So a lot of people talk about fertility superfoods and eating organic, avoiding toxins, but very often they're missing one important piece. And it's not so much about what you eat, it's about the ratios. And specifically, I'm talking about the omega-3 to omega-6 ratios that people usually get backwards. It can actually be that you have a healthy diet that is pro-inflammatory, meaning leading to more inflammation in your body, especially when it comes to fertility. So you can eat all the organic vegetables and grass-fed meat you want, but if your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is off, you're creating inflammation, and that in turn hurts both your egg and sperm quality, obviously not in the same body. So you might be thinking, why is that? Here's what happens. Omega-6 fatty acids, which are nuts, seeds, vegetable oils, and some healthy foods like avocados, they promote inflammation when they're not balanced with the right amount of omega-3s. And in our modern diets, we usually get way too much omega-6 and by far not enough omega-3s. And that creates chronic low-level inflammation throughout our bodies. But it's a no-brainer that this inflammation affects the egg quality because it damages the cellular structure where the egg matures. It can even affect sperm quality because it increases the oxidative stress that damages sperm DNA. Picture it like having a low-grade fire burning in your reproductive system, like the whole time causing a little bit of damage. The foods that actually help fertility are usually the ones that restore this balance, meaning fatty fish, algae-based omega-3 supplements, and of course high omega-6 foods that everyone thinks are healthy should be reduced. Walnuts, sunflower seeds, even too much olive oil can tip the scales towards inflammation if you're not balancing them properly. Next one, sperm are terrible navigators. Let's start with why sperm are basically the worst travelers ever created. These little guys don't have maps, no GPS, and they don't have a sense of direction. Yes, true, no sense of direction. They're just swimming somewhere. So what they do have is something called a beacon system, where the egg sends out a chemical signal and the sperm just follows those signals like they're chasing a scent trail. And here's where it gets ridiculous. When sperm hits a wall or obstacle, they don't think, oh, let me get back up and find another route. Nope, they just keep hitting the wall over and over again, trying to push through. So they can't even distinguish between the egg and the wall. If you're old enough to know Sims and you know how these characters behave, then this is pretty much the picture. It's like watching someone repeatedly walk into a glass door instead of looking for the handle. And this is where uterus positioning becomes crucial, and this is now the really interesting and important fact, because it's something people never learn about. The uterus of a woman can be positioned in different ways. Anteverted, which is just a fancy word for saying tilted forward, or retroverted, which is a fancy word for tilted backward. So if the uterus is tilted to the back, retroverted, which is pretty common, then the sperm have to navigate around a little, let's say, awkward angle to reach the egg, making it more difficult for the sperm to reach the egg. What does that mean for you when you're trying to conceive? The sexual positions that feel sometimes most uncomfortable during ovulation are often the ones that work best for conception. So if you are a woman and you have a retroverted uterus, positions from behind actually give sperm the best angle to reach where they need to go. So yes, the whole thing about how do you have sex when you want to conceive actually impacts your fertility or your chances of conception. And yeah, well, I would say it's not comfortable, but it's geometry and it's not romance. So let's go on, because sperm navigation isn't the only weird thing about fertility. Now for the most surprising myth that's actually true, and that's the one that struck me the most. The lying down myth is true after sex. So you've probably heard that you should lie down after sex to help with conception, but it's actually not about gravity. Some people think, oh, sperm will fall out, and if you stand up too quickly, they can't really reach the egg. But this is completely wrong. And the practice of lying down works for a completely different reason. The science has nothing to do with gravity and everything with your ladies' pelvic floor muscle relaxation. You're like, what is pelvic floor muscle relaxation? So when you're tense or anxious after intercourse, your pelvic floor muscles stay contracted. And these muscles control the opening to your cervix. And when they're tight, they can actually create a barrier that makes it harder for sperm to reach where they need to go. Bummer. So here's what happens when you lie down and relax for those 10 to 15 minutes. The entire pelvic region releases tension, meaning your cervix becomes more receptive, the muscle around your reproductive organs soften, and the whole area becomes more conducive to conception. So it's not really about keeping sperm from falling out, it's about creating the optimal muscular environment for fertilization, basically for sperm to travel even higher upward. And that's super important because most couples are stressed during their fertile window, totally understandable. And if you're tracking ovulation, timing or trying to time everything perfectly, which we all know is not really possible, then of course you feel pressure to perform and to achieve something. And that tension can translate into physical muscle tension, and that in turn can work against conception. So lying down works, but the reasons connect back to everything we've talked about. It reduces stress, which lowers inflammation, optimizes the physical position based on your uterus anatomy, and it gives your body time to shift from the sympathetic nervous system response back to the parasympathetic state, and this is where reproduction happens best. Alright, this brings together all 5 facts. Sperm need all the help they can get with navigation, timing matters for sperm quality, stress creates a hostile environment, inflammation from diet affects everything, including reproduction, and physical relaxation optimizes the whole system. So it's not one magic bullet, it's understanding how all of these pieces work together. So there you have it. Fertility is way more complex and interconnected than most people realize. It's not just about timing ovulation or eating the right foods. It's about understanding how stress, inflammation, anatomy, and even muscle tension all work together to either support or sabotage your conception. My biggest takeaway here is that your body is constantly trying to optimize for survival, and reproduction only happens when everything feels safe and balanced. And that's why the holistic approach to health that I talk about in my other videos matters so much for fertility as well. If you want more content about optimizing your health naturally, hit that subscribe button. I've got tons more myth-busting videos coming that'll change how you think about your body and health.